Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Anthony Rivera, host of Subway to Shea Podcast. How's it going, Anthony?
I'm doing great. I could not have come on here at a better time on a better day following a awesome series that we just wrapped up against Atlanta at home.
Yeah, and you guys just won, and now you guys, I think, have a 6.5 game lead on Atlanta at the time of the recording. So that looks good right now. You guys have a comfortable lead. I know we're in August, and we still got we probably got about a month left, I think, but still, it's nice to have that lead. But before we start really talking about baseball and talking about your Mets, if you kind of want to talk more about your podcast and all that good stuff.
Yeah, my podcast is called Subway to Shea, based off of, Shea Stadium, what used to be. Now we have Citi Field, but I always grew up going to Shea Stadium and watching the games from there. That's how I became a fan. And then, you would see the neon lights outside of Shea Stadium. And that's kind of, if you check out my logo, it's very neon-esque of the old school of what that stadium used to look like. But I cover a whole lot of things, the day-to-day, week by week of what goes on in Mets news. But I also like to cover history and, talk about a whole bunch of things. I've had on guests before. I had on former Met manager Bobby Valentine. I had a former Met player, Glendon Rush, on. I'm working on some other things right now. But it's been a fun ride. I started back in 2020 during the pandemic, and when, Steve Cohen took over, because if I did this, under the Wilpon regime, it'd probably be a lot of me cursing and being angry the whole time. So I couldn't have started at a more perfect time.
Well, you said you started your podcast back in 2020. That's when we started, me and my brother. Then it was 7-Eleven Sports at the time. Then I changed it up. But it was very hard. I remember I feel your pain, because back then it was very hard to find some type of sports content. So I do feel the pain there. And I do like the logo, the Subway to Shea logo. And yeah, so again, thanks for coming on. Let's start talking about the Mets. Now, they did win today 5-2. They have a 6.5 game lead, as I mentioned previously. Do you think the Mets are going to be able to hold on to that division to the postseason, or do you think they'll pull kind of a classic Met and they'll kind of struggle down the stretch?
So I don't want to 100% say that I think that they're going to win the division, because, we are talking about the Atlanta Braves. Even though they lost 4 out of 5, they had a big run to prior to this loss and this losing streak. They went on a big run to get within, I think it was 3.5 games. It even got close to 1.5. They had a big run in May and June and even July, where I think they lost. They didn't even lose more than 10 games, I think. And, the Mets had a 10.5 game lead. Everyone compares, losing this lead to what happened, last year and how the team blew it last year. But this is different. You have the veteran manager in Buck Showalter. He's a very important part of this team. His coaching staff has been very important in shaping this team to, play the right way, go out and do the right things. He makes some very good calls in challenging, and everything has seemed to have worked. The way he has mixed in every player on the team, from, Francisco Lindor all the way to, Tyler Naquin and Darren Ruff, who they just acquired, Daniel Vogelback. Everyone has somehow been a part of this run for this team. Now they're at 70 wins, tied with the Yankees now. They're both 70 and 39. So I do think that I don't want to 100% say that the Mets are going to win the division, because anything can happen. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even have to be the Mets blowing it. We all saw when the Braves started coming back, the Mets weren't really blowing it. The Braves were just playing very well. Mm-hmm. And, the Mets were kind of, playing 500, but staying on top. And it would be, nice to see them get through and pay through, especially with the way the playoffs are now, because, they have the added teams. There's going to be a couple of buys for, the first and second team in the National League. And if the Mets can somehow get one of those buys, they won't have to play, the Braves or the Phillies, or they won't have to play the Padres, who have just, gotten all the players that they have gotten to make them big time contenders. So if the Mets can win the division, I would hope that they go for that and try their best to hold off the Braves. And this was a good start this weekend.
Yeah, and I mean it was a good for you guys to take that series against the Braves. And it seems like the Braves, I think they did this last year too, where they kind of have a slow start and then toward the end they get really hot. And of course they won the World Series last year, but it kind of felt like a little bit early on, I think in late July and August. But now I think the Mets have they're back to having that comfortable lead. But yeah, if the Mets can win it, I think that you guys, again, you wouldn't have to take on a Padres team or depending on who win the NL Central between the Cardinals and Brewers. So let's continue talking about the Mets here a little bit longer. Right now, who do you think? Well, actually, let's talk about too. Jacob Degrom is back, and that's huge for you guys. And when healthy, he's a very good pitcher. Do you think where do you rank Degrom among the top pitchers in the league right now?
It's really hard because he's only gotten those 2 starts. We saw today he's been the best pitcher in baseball, minus, getting hurt last year. And even before he got hurt, he was on a historic run. Like if he would have continued to play, not only would he have won the Cy Young, but we could have been talking about MVP. He was doing things that haven't been seen, since Bob Gibson in, 68, the year of the pitcher. So, I've always thought of him as the best pitcher in baseball. It's hard to say that, right now because he's only had 2 starts, but we saw today why, he has been this whole time the best pitcher in baseball. He had a perfect game almost through 5 innings and, 12 strikeouts. He was mowing the Braves down, and just seeing him, get back on track and seeing the Jacob Degrom of old that we've all seen, it could only help this team down the stretch. I know a lot of fans probably wanted to see a perfect game or a no-hitter, but I'm kind of glad that they got the walk and the home run to kind of knock that out, because I really didn't want him to pitch all those innings right now because we're going to need him for the postseason, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, and I think too, before his injury back last year, I think it was around July that he got hurt. He was looking like the MVP, and even some people predicting him to be an MVP. So, and especially when you guys have Degrom, that's nice, especially going in the later months and into the postseason and stuff like that. So, we'll see what happens there. So, with the Mets right now, I think it's I think the Dodgers have the best record in the National League, I believe, right? So the Dodgers have the best record. Do you think? Actually, let's talk about that a little later. Right now, with the MVP voting is getting interesting, or the MVP race is getting interesting in the American League and the National League. If the season ended today, who would be your AL MVP and who would be your NL MVP?
I think the AL MVP has got to be Aaron Judge from the Yankees. I mean, he's having a astronomically crazy season right now. His home runs, he just keeps belting home runs. He had 4 RBIs today. I think he leads the league in RBIs right now, about like 97, I think, at the moment. That was the last time I checked. He had 97. So, and he's, going for, Maris's home run record for the Yankees, which was 61. I don't know how close he's going to get to Barry Bonds, and if people still count that as, the home run record, but he's going to get pretty close. I mean, he hits home. I think he went on a string where he hit a home run in 10 out of 11 games. He's been it's been crazy watching him throughout this season and seeing what he could do. And the fact that the Yankees, didn't give him the contract that he wants, and now he's going into this contract, he's going to get a lot of money, a lot of money in the National League. I got to think about that a little bit. I know a lot has been said about Paul Goldschmidt and what he's done for the St. Louis Cardinals. Right now, he's the front runner, and I like to be biased. I think Pete Alonso has had a crazy good season. He's up there too in RBIs with, I think, 93 and around 28, 29 home runs. So if he can continue on his pace or have a big end of August, big September to, get this team into the postseason, there may be an opportunity for him. Another Met, quite possibly. I know they don't give it to relievers, but Edwin Diaz has been, untouchable this whole season, and that could be a possibility on the Mets. And I don't know anyone else really besides these guys that have really, shown to be MVP. But if it was today, I think Paul Goldschmidt might be the one that takes it.
Okay. Yeah, and being a Cardinals fan, I'm really pumped about Paul Goldschmidt winning the MVP. But P. Alonso is another guy, too, that I think a lot of people forget. He's probably a top 3 first baseman right now, with Goldschmidt and Guerrero. And Freddie Freeman is probably somewhere still in the top 5 somewhere, maybe Matt Olson as well. But yeah, those are some good predictions. But do you think if a guy like Ohtani, he's once again in the MVP race, if he was on a play, I don't know, going to the playoffs and winning MVP isn't like, last year, Ohtani won the MVP without making the playoffs. I understand that's not as big in baseball to make the playoffs and to win a big league, a big award like that. But do you think if the Angels were better and were a playoff team at the moment, would Ohtani be the front runner?
I think so. He would have to be having a really crazy season. I mean, looking at his stats this year, 253, 24 home runs, 65 RBIs. He doesn't even lead in some of the categories. Like, I know he also pitches too, but I think Aaron Judge has just been too good to, pass that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you as well, but it just seems like Ohtani and even Mike Trout too, and I know he's out at the moment, but it seems like those two players so good, yet the Angels can't really get anywhere, but we'll talk about them a little bit later. Let's go back to Jacob Degrom a little bit. I forgot to mention this, but I believe he is a free agent after the end of the season. Do you think he wants to remain with the Mets, or what do you think is going to happen at the end of the season with Degrom?
I think the Mets are going to sign him. Steve Cohen, being the, I guess the richest owner in baseball, has all the money needed to bring him back. They're going to have a lot of contracts coming off the books. They're going to have to replace a lot of players, but, Jacob Degrom, he's been the homegrown Met. Unless money is not an option for him and he wants to really go home and pitch in, Florida or Atlanta, around that area where he's from, I think he's going to stay with the Mets. You kind of get that, Tom Seaver type vibe, with Jacob Degrom, and, Steve Cohen being a Mets fan his whole life growing up. Tom Seaver was his favorite player, and seeing the way Tom left and how Tom got treated, on his way out, I think the Mets would do a disservice, to the team, to the fan base, by not re-signing him at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're the only ones that can, match any contract that's going to be given out there. I don't know who else is in the line for a big time starting pitcher, but who is going to give Jake the money if, Steve, gives him a blank check and just, offers him whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if the Mets can keep Jacob Degrom, that would be huge for him. But I think whoever gets Jacob Degrom is definitely going to help their chances immensely. Another guy too, that seems like that he turned down, I think, a contract. So Aaron Judge, I believe he's a free agent at the end of the season as well. Why do you think he rejected the Yankees offer the first time? And is there a chance he leaves the Big Apple?
I think there is a chance that he can leave. I think it would be a mistake by the Yankees to let him go.
Mm-hmm.
With all the contracts that have been given out so far, whether it's Fernando Tatis, or, even Francisco Lindor, Judge, at the position that he plays, with the production that he's given and playing in New York, he's so valuable. And I think he bet on himself. I know the Yankees think of him one way, and obviously he's had to deal with injuries, but not this season, not last season. And the fact that he's played the way he's played this whole season kind of hurts, the Yankees, chances of bringing him back. It doesn't make it easy that the Yankees are, definitely going to sign him. He's a California boy, so, who knows, maybe the Giants might be in on him, or I can't see the Dodgers. I don't know. They have a lot of money on the books, and then Padres just got, Soto, but,
Mm-hmm.
I've been hearing a lot about the Giants possibly being in on Aaron Judge, and, that might be perfect for them to get a superstar player, but to see the Yankees let him go, I don't know. I think it would be a disservice. He's such a, homegrown guy. He's a fan favorite, possibly could be the next captain of the team. So I would bet right now that he would stay in New York.
That would be a huge loss too if the Yankees would lose a guy like Aaron Judge, because he is probably their best player, and as you just mentioned, he's the front runner for the AL MVP. That's a huge loss, and he's still really not super young, but he's still young enough where he's got a lot of prime still left. So that would be a huge loss for a team like the Yankees. Before we start talking about the trade deadline, I think it's been a week now. Vince Scully passed away, and I understand he did the Dodgers and he did the Mets, but a lot of people consider him as one of the greatest broadcasters of all time. He did it broadcasting for over 50 years or something like that, which is crazy. And I think they were talking that back then he did it all by himself. I think he did the first 6 or 7 innings. He did some other sports as well, but being the Dodgers broadcaster was his number one thing that he was known for. What do you think what is your reflections what is your thoughts on Vince Scully passing away?
Yeah, if he's not one of the best, he may be the best sportscaster, broadcaster that has ever, been out there. And Vin, I think it was maybe 67 years. I mean, he was broadcasting when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn. Like, he broadcasted Jackie Robinson games all the way to now we've got Clayton Kershaw pitching. So like, he's was around for a very, very long time. He did a lot of national games. I wasn't alive during the 1986 World Series, but, I can always go back and watch. And his call of the, Bill Buckner error is probably one of the biggest calls of all time in World Series history. So the way he was able to tell a story, and, sometimes he would even just sit back and let you hear the crowd and let them tell the story for you. He just knew how to, be that guy and make you live that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was baseball pretty much, as we all thought. Dodgers baseball. I mean, to do it for 67 years, you said, that's incredible. And it's kind of crazy too, because I think Bob Costas was talking about, and Bob Costas is a little older too, but he remembers Vince Scully. So does Al Michaels. I mean, that's just crazy how long he did it. And do you think there will be anyone, or do you think there'll be anyone else even close to Vince Scully?
Just in baseball? I don't know, because everything is so regional now. Mm-hmm. And when you think of these guys coming on to do this, you got the Joe Bucks of the world. I mean, he just left to go to, I think it was ESPN, but there's just so many announcers, and they don't, it's changed where they don't, like on the game of the week, they won't have, like, if the Mets are playing, you're not going to hear Gary, Keith, and Ron do, the broadcast. There's always some, national announcer going on. I don't know if there is going to be a guy like Vin doing what Vin does. Obviously, you mentioned Bob Costas. He's, a big name out there. Al Michaels, that's another one. But everyone's like so regional. And then there's some, broadcasters who could be homers, for their teams. I don't know if you hear like the Chicago White Sox broadcast and how they are, the Braves have their own guys and they call things differently. And, sometimes the Mets too do the same thing. So I don't know if there's any, broadcaster who can, just tell a story and has done it by himself. Like you mentioned, like how Vince Scully used to do it by himself. I just don't know if we'll, see something like that ever again.
Yeah, I mean, he was an incredible announcer, probably the greatest broadcaster of all time, at least, especially in baseball. So definitely rest in peace, Vince Scully. So let's start with talking about the trade deadline. The big news was Juan Soto going to the Padres. Do you think the Juan Soto trade will actually be enough? Because I think right now the Padres are still back in the NL West. And I know the Dodgers are really good, but it seems like the Padres won't be able to catch them. Do you think even with the addition of Juan Soto, do you think the Padres will finally be able to catch up with the Dodgers?
I don't know, because the Dodgers pretty much have been taking care of them this weekend. They lost on Friday to the Dodgers, 8-1. Then they lost Saturday 8-3. Now they're losing 2-0. And this, not, we're talking about, a team that just got Juan Soto. They got Josh Bell. They got Brandon Drury. Fernando Tatis is coming back. Maybe let's wait until Fernando Tatis is back to see if anything changes. It might be too late for the division, but they'll definitely be in the playoffs and they can wreak havoc there. I mean, they pretty much ran roughshod over the Mets during their 2 series that they played in San Diego and here in New York. So as much as they added to the offense, it's going to be the pitching that what gets you through. The Dodgers have the pitching, Mets have pitching. Braves, even though they, struggled, they got pitching too. So if the Padres pitching is as good, they'll definitely make a deep run into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because I think still, even with the addition of Juan Soto and Josh Bell, I think a lot of Dodgers fans still think that the Padres are the little brothers, right? And I think I heard there was recently one of the Dodgers, it was a local newscast, I think, and basically said that they beat their little brother. So I feel like, Dodgers still quite, because they pretty much dominated the division since 2015 or 2016. I mean, the Giants, I know, were dominated for a while, but now it's kind of been the Dodgers. So even with the addition of Juan Soto and Josh Bell, I feel like still like the Padres are still not quite there. They do have a good pitcher in Joe Musgrove, but Blake Snell and Yu Darvish haven't quite produced what they did when they acquired him a few years ago. So yeah, it would be interesting. I can't wait to watch because the NL postseason, I feel like, is going to be pretty interesting, because right now it seems like there's still a bunch of teams in there. So we'll see what happens. All right. So some other things that happened in the trade deadline. Now, Juan Soto was the big one, right? But was there another trade that I'm not mentioning right now that you really think is going to be huge in the playoffs?
Well, the Yankees made the move for Montas, which I think they desperately needed a starting pitcher. They lost out on Luis Castillo, and you know what? Luis Castillo may help propel the Mariners to the postseason. So, we'll see with that. But Houston made a couple of big moves. Trey Mancini, Christian Vasquez. Those were two huge moves to help solidify that offense. I mean, I saw Houston come in and sweep us 4 games just with the offense that they had already had. They're going to be a tough out. I mean, I think the AL postseason, if I had to go today, you're going to see the Yankees and the Astros in the ALCS. Now, I know the Yankees have struggled. They got swept by the Cardinals this weekend. Tough for, the Yankees, but a good way to propel the Cardinals into, a playoff spot at some point. But I don't see the Yankees, and especially being from this area, I'll see the Yankees lose I'll believe it when I see it with them. They this is their tough stretch right now, but they built such a lead in the division that I don't see them, either getting knocked out early or just not making it at all. There's always been this collision course between the Astros and the Yankees at some point to get to the ALCS. And I think we'll get to there.
Yeah, another trade too that was interesting that a lot of people were talking about over the weekend was the St. Louis Cardinals trading Harrison Bader, probably the fastest guy in baseball, getting Jordan Montgomery, and he goes out and pitches really great on Saturday. They win 1-0. Do you think Montgomery, he probably definitely wanted revenge because he probably didn't want to be traded.
Absolutely.
But what do you think about Jordan Montgomery, and do you think he can be a solid starting pitcher for the Cardinals team that pretty much needs pitching?
I mean, he pitched okay when I saw him the one time for that. It was actually his last start was against the Mets for the Yankees. And, he pitched okay. They took him out early and he was very upset about that. I mean, especially if you guys need pitching, right? If the Cardinals need pitching, I think that having Jordan Montgomery as the lefty works. The Yankees pretty much got rid of him because they said they didn't think he was going to pitch in the postseason, which is surprising to me because they, lost Luis Severino and now he's on the IL. I don't know what the purpose of that move was. It was very last second. It was like one of those at the end of the buzzer type moves between the Yankees and Cardinals. So I don't know why they made that move. And I think a lot of fans seem to be, from listening to, sports radio up here, a lot of fans seem to be confused about the move. Harrison Bader, I mean, he always, crushed the Mets. He was always a pest. So that may work out for the Yankees outfield who, they don't really like Aaron Hicks out there. They just got rid of Joey Gallo. They traded for Benintendi, and then you'll have also Aaron Judge out there. So that move may actually work its way for both teams. It's really hard, to play in New York, and, Montgomery, I thought was a decent enough pitcher, but they didn't see him pitching in the postseason. So I think that's why they traded him.
Mhm. And Harrison Bader, I mean, he's not the best hitter, but he's a great in the outfield, and especially with him being one of the, if not the fastest guy in baseball. However, I think he does have an injury currently, and I think that might be why the Cardinals were a little afraid to keep him. But another team, or another, of course, we talked about Juan Soto. Do you think there'll be? I know the Cardinals and the Mets were involved in the trade as well, and I think the Dodgers were involved as well. But do you think there's one team that's going to be going to regret not being able to acquire Juan Soto?
I mean, the Mets had no, say in that, because the Nationals were not going to trade him to New York. They didn't want him to stay in the division, so he was going to go out west. The only team that really affects is the Dodgers. It doesn't really. I mean, if the Cardinals wanted offense, I don't know if what they were looking for, they just was going out for pitching, but the Cardinals won't really see him as much unless they make it to the postseason. And the same with the Mets. It would only be, 3 or, 2 games, depending on what the series is. But I think what's important is that one of these teams that are in the top, the other teams like the Dodgers, Mets, and Cardinals, try to avoid having to play them in a short series. I think that's what's important. And whichever team plays them, they got to get home field, because in this round of the playoffs, that first round, that wild card round, the team that leads is going to have all 3 games at their at their ballpark. So you're going to want that. I mean, I don't want to face them in a 3-game set. I'd rather wait until they get to the division series and we get a 5-game set. So I don't know how much the Soto effect will come into play. We'll find out once we get to the postseason. But if the Dodgers are manhandling them like they're doing right now, I mean, it might not even make a difference. This might come later on, maybe next season. They're going to need time to mesh and come together as a team. There's a whole lot of moving parts that happen, and a whole lot of new people that came in. They also got Josh Hader from Milwaukee, so those might be big moves as well. I don't even think that San Diego really needed to make that move. If they would have got just Josh Bell and Drury and also Hader, I think that would have been good enough to help them get through. I mean, obviously Soto is a superstar, but I don't know. I don't know how well this is going to work out for them. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but anything can happen in the postseason.
Do you think Mike Trout or Ohtani gets traded this offseason?
I do. Not Trout, but I think Ohtani. And I think that, not to be biased, but I think there may be a possibility that it would be to the Mets because of the whole Billy Epler was the one who signed him. I think the Mets, if you saw at the trade deadline, they didn't really make any big moves. They brought in Tyler Naquin. They brought in Daniel Vogelback. On the trade deadline day, they brought in Darren Ruff. And they brought in Michael Givens, all these component pieces, because they didn't want to trade any of their prospects for any rentals. And they ended up saving all their prospects. And I think it was the Friday before the trade deadline, they spoke with Anaheim to kind of gauge to see where they were at. And I think that they were saving those prospects for a trade in the offseason for Ohtani because they came out real quick and said, hey, we're not trading, Mark Vientos. We're not trading Ronnie Mauricio right now. We're not trading any of our top guys. I think Epler came out and said he wasn't trading any of his top 19 prospects. If you're not doing that, you're not going to get any big guys. And if they were to do that, it probably would have been for Soto. But, Soto was not coming here because of the whole in division thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting right now with Mike. Well, Ohtani's definitely, I think a lot of people are going to, a lot of teams are going to want him, so they're probably going to have to give up a lot. But with Mike Trout, it seems like he's probably just going to stay with the Angels for the rest of his career, and I don't think he's ever going to win a championship, and there's a good chance he might not even win a playoff game or a playoff round. So do you think Mike Trout do you think he ever leaves the Angels in his career, or do you think he's just going to stay there especially with his contract the way it is?
I think he's going to stay. I think he made a mistake signing that big contract to stay in Anaheim, where they really didn't have a game plan. They just went out to sign whatever was the highest, free agents. They went out for Rendon. This year they went out and they gave I think it was, I don't know if it was was it 1 year or 2 years? They gave out a big contract for Noah Syndergaard coming off of Tommy John surgery. I mean, I don't understand some of the moves that they were trying to make there. They got into a good start and then it all fell apart. And now they started trading off their pieces. They traded Brandon Marsh, who was a pest and kind of like a Bader was in the outfield. I don't see Anaheim making any big moves. And now we find out also that he's got a very, bad back injury, which I don't know if it's spinal stenosis, but they said it's not a good thing. So he's going to try to play through it. But, we dealt with something like that in New York with David Wright. The Yankees dealt with it with Dom Mattingly. So the back injuries are something serious. And if he's got spinal stenosis, I worry about his time playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to see Mike Trout not be able to be with a good team. And yeah, the Angels have taken so many swings at big time free agents and it just hasn't worked. And like I said, the Syndergaard thing, then they traded him away through the year. Same thing with Anthony Rendon. He's hurt right now. That wasn't a very good sign. I mean, they signed Pujols a long time ago. That was kind of the start of it all. And he just didn't quite live up to expectation like they signed him to. So it is kind of disappointing, especially with how he's the best baseball player, but yet no one ever gets to see him because the Angels have made the playoffs once and they got swept. So it's really depressing to see that even if you're not an Angels fan, you're just a baseball fan in general. So again, it's depressing or it's disappointing not to see Mike Trout in those big games. So another thing too is we're getting down to basically the nitty gritty where we're getting close to the postseason. What team in the American League do you like, and what team in the National League do you really like right now?
Well, because we played them, I'm going to say the Astros right now. They had a pretty sound game playing us. They obviously swept us, 4-game set, 2 here, 2 in Houston, and it was not even close. I think we had one game where we kind of made it close to the 9th inning, and then they kind of just destroyed us. It was just not even close. The Yankees, I don't know. They have a lot of, issues of their own that they're dealing with. And I do think that them and the Astros will make it to the championship series, but I think that the Astros are my pick to make it to the World Series. And one team that, may surprise may be Seattle. I mean, they went out, they got Luis Castillo. I think also the Twins, they made a lot of moves at the trade deadline. So those guys you might want to look out for.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting too, because the Astros seem to always be that team where a lot of people take them for granted, but yet they make that deep run. I think it was back in 2020. It was a shortened season, but yet they were able to make it all the way, and they were 1 game away within making the World Series. So do you have a team? So you have the Astros in the American League. What's your team in the National League?
I got to go with my Mets. I know it sounds as biased as it is, but pitching gets you through to the championship. Always pitching. And when you got Jacob Degrom, if he's pitching the way he did today, and you got Max Scherzer the way he pitched this weekend, and then you got Chris Bassett on top of that, and then you also got Taijuan Walker, and you got Carlos Carrasco. This is probably one of the best rotations that I've ever seen in my life. Being a Mets fan, I've never seen a rotation like this. I have never seen a team like this dominate the way they have. There's quite a possibility that this year they win over 100 games. Then it will be the first time I've ever seen them win over 100 games, even when they had their best run, which was probably 2006. That was the one year that I thought that this team would win the World Series. They didn't, because their pitching got hurt as we got to the postseason. They lost Pedro Martinez, they lost El Duque, and the team was just not the same without starting pitching. But this team's got so much depth into starting pitching, and whoever doesn't start in the playoffs will probably be put into the bullpen and be a long guy along with Trevor Williams, who's pitched well. And you got the best closer right now, and Edwin Diaz, who's been shut down. If he can continue his pace, he's good. And these Mets know just how to grind at bats out. They picked apart Atlanta this weekend, and I think I tweeted it out that I've never seen Atlanta so shook before playing them. They've always owned the Mets for over 2-3 decades. They've owned the Mets. And now we're at a point where we kind of, we messed them up for a weekend. And maybe it's just the weekend. I don't know. But I think that either the Mets or the Dodgers will be that team. And I got to go with my Mets. I don't know. It's just a feeling sometimes that you have. We haven't played the Dodgers as much. We split the series. I think we have one more series coming up, maybe at the end of August, it might be with them. And we'll get a good gauge how that series is going to go. But if I had to see an NLCS right now, for me, it's, Dodgers and Mets. And then you'd have San Diego maybe spark out of the wild card piece there. You also got, you got St. Louis, Atlanta, and Philly, who, Atlanta's actually got to watch out for Philly. They're only 3.5 games out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting too, with what you said about the Mets and stuff like that. So another team too, do you think the Red Sox right now are just trying to tank, or what happened to the Red Sox?
I've never seen what has happened to them happen right now. I don't know what they were doing at the trade deadline. They kind of fall on the line with the Colorado Rockies, where like, hey, they were going to trade some pieces, but then they held on to JD Martinez, and then you're seeing them out on the field, and it's like a comedy of errors for them. I just don't know what happened, and for as much love Alex Cora got in the beginning, I don't know about some of the moves that he's been making. But for the Red Sox, it always changes every year. Like there'll be 1 year they're in last place, and then next year they're in the World Series. So it might just be, one bad year. They lost, Chris Sale, which hurts a lot. They're in some kind of trouble at the moment, though. Even Baltimore is ahead of them in the standings. So it's a down year for the Red Sox, but I think they'll be back.
It also doesn't really help with the Red Sox that Chris Sale still isn't 100%. And then you also have Rafael Devers that went down for a little bit. Yeah, but the Red Sox, you just mentioned, they're 1 year they're really good and 1 year they're not. That's kind of like the Giants when they'd win the World Series, they'd be terrible, or they wouldn't make the playoffs next year. Then they go win the World Series, and then so it seems like the Red Sox are kind of that same way, because last year they went to the playoffs, beat the Yankees in the wild card round, and then this year it looks like they're not even going to make it the playoffs, especially with how tough their division is. So it is interesting how the Red Sox every year it's something different. Also too, with the Astros, do you think Jose Altuve is still the best player on that team?
I don't know, but like Jordan Alvarez, from what I've seen, from what he's done, I think he's going to be more of a superstar than, possibly a Juan Soto at some point, or like with the power that he has, and just he's just a big boy. I don't know, man. He has just been, crazy this season. Altuve just knows how to play too during, like against all odds. Like I went to, I don't know, was the Yankee series. I went to one of those games, and they were booing him profusely, and he still gets hits. Like it doesn't bother him. Nothing phases him. So I think he is one of the best players in baseball on the team. I don't know. Jordan Alvarez will give him a good run for his money soon.
And do you think he's still the best second baseman in the league, or where do you rank him among the second basemen in the MLB?
Yeah, I would put him as a top second baseman. Definitely.
Yeah, I know he's not very tall. He's 5'7", 5'8", maybe, but it seems like every year, though, especially with the Astros, it seems like everybody doesn't like him, of course, because of the whole cheating scandal. But yet, as you mentioned, he gets it done almost every year, and I still think he's the best second baseman. I think he's been the best second baseman since he won the MVP like 5 years ago. So, definitely ranks in the top there. So again, as we're ending the interview, and again, thanks for coming on. Is there anything else you want to add before we end, or?
No, I just hope that we come through with a nice little playoff run here for the Mets. And I think we're going to get a really good playoff series with the new format and everything. Yeah. And just like how everything has turned out this season, we got some really good teams in the National League all around, whether it's the Dodgers or, the Padres. A lot of these teams have, some rivalry going against them with, you got the Dodgers and the Padres, the Dodgers and the Mets. St. Louis and the Mets, they had a big rivalry earlier on in the season. Mets in Atlanta, Mets in Philly. It's going to be a good postseason. I don't know how the American League is going to turn out because I still think it's just a 2-team race. When the Twins actually beat the Yankees in a postseason series, I'll believe it. But you got to watch out for them. You got to watch out for Seattle. Those teams might actually, turn some heads during the postseason this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like the new format as well. 6 teams making it instead of 4 teams. Then you have the wild card game. I definitely like the 6-team format. Makes it a little more competitive, especially what happened back in 2020. We had some really good series in that first round. I think that's kind of one reason why they went to that. So, all right, again, thanks for coming on. Enjoy the rest of the baseball season, and good luck to your Mets. Even though I'm a Cardinals fan, but again, good luck to your Mets. And have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.